All righty. Tell me if this fills the screen here in just a second.
It looks perfect.
Does it? Huh.
Well, we do see your thumbnails.
Yeah, I don't have it. Here we go. There we go. How's that?
Yep, you got it.
That's it.
Okay. Well, I thought I'd go over some I'll call them habits. And most of these are things that I've noticed in my own shooting and have been brought to my attention for various reasons. And so we'll just kind of have an interactive session tonight and go through some of them. So, all of us take this hobby fairly seriously. We enjoy it. We look at other people's work. We do some studying, share information, and we try and make habits so that our skills become second nature. And so that's kind of what I want to get through tonight. But some habits seem to slip in that are not so productive. And I'm going to go through some of them tonight. And these are from my own experience. They're all mine. You may share some of them, and I hope we can improve on those and continue to improve on them going forward. So the first one is really pretty simple. It seems to be simple, but I always seem to have a problem with where the heck did the lens cap go? I have several different lenses, and Meg and I usually shoot together, and at times I just don't know where it is. And so when changing lenses or packing up, I tend to maybe just throw the equipment into the bag or put it on the seat or put it in a place that maybe isn't the best place, because the lens cap really does do a job of protecting your equipment. So this is a simple one, but I now dedicate a pocket in my getup, whether it's I'm wearing a coat or not a coat, but I pick a front pocket on the right side and I try and keep the lens cap there. May seem minor, but believe me, when I've been shooting down on the beach with the sand blowing around and stuff like that, it's important to know where your lens cap is. I also saw this little item in the lower right-hand corner. I don't wear a camera strap often, but that looked like a pretty good gadget too, that you can just slide your lens cap in there. But principally, know where it's at, use it, because it'll save some grief in the long run. Second one, we do a lot of studying. At least I do. And I look at many of the pictures in our own club, and I look at others. And we'll find some photos that really resonate with us, that we really like, whether it's the location, subject, time of day, composition, or any of those. And I'll sometimes go out and try and recreate. But my keeper rate tends to be really low, and certainly my satisfaction is less than something that I came upon myself. So one of the things I try and do a lot, and my wife Meg has helped me with this a fair amount, is when approaching your shot, try and go in with a fresh, open look. And think before you overcommit to the shot. Blank out the study that you've done when you're entering a particular shoot. Kind of go in with an open mind. And even if they're your own shots, just go in and go in clean. So the habit here is to go in with a clean slate, really begin to look and see with your own eyes. I think a couple weeks ago when we had, I forgot his name, black and white photographer on, many times he said, his keepers weren't till the end of his shoot. And I think sometimes you have to just go in, spend some time in the area, look at what you're doing, see with your own eyes, and you'll come away with more keepers. And your skills will tend to take over once you begin to look. So this photo of mine on the right, here is one that I had seen somewhere, and we were out sailing in British Columbia, and I was leaning over the rail trying to get the sunset with the ship in the foreground. And I got them, and then I kind of took it again and again, and then I happened to look up, and I should have been looking around more and not be concentrating so much on just that particular shot, because this is the shot I then got. We were headed around this point, and if I hadn't been aware and looking within a minute or two, all the alignment would have changed in that particular shot, which I really liked, would have been lost. So kind of go in with an open mind. Even though you may see some things you really like, your skills will tend to take over. Here's another example This is called Balance Rock. It's in Haida Gwaii Islands off British Columbia again. That rock is about 15 feet high, just to give you an idea. It's a huge rock, and how it just sits there, I don't know. But I was concentrating and seeing some pictures when, just Google some things, and that's what I was doing. And I, again, began to get comfortable in the situation, look around a little bit, see what other perspectives I could get. And I took this shot because I noticed the clouds were kind of mirroring the rocks on the beach. And that was one that I kind of really enjoyed then. Oh, Margaret's reminding me the diagonals too. But it's again, so don't overcommit to your shoot. Keep your eyes open. Go in with an open mind. So another habit here that we'll bring up is kind of the idea of just one more. I do this a lot, too much probably. Staying in one place too long, waiting for that magical moment, particularly in the golden hour or the blue hour. I'll get the shot, but then I'll stay to make sure that I really got the shot, because maybe something else will happen and I end up with 100 more pretty much the same thing. So you're unsure that the next will capture something I missed, but really it ends up being a process of diminishing returns. So the habit that I think I'm trying to impress upon myself is get the shot, okay? Make sure you got it, but once you feel that you've got one or two or three or four, remember there's only one best shot, move on, because look for other angles, other viewpoints or conditions that you're gonna miss if you stay put. So here's an example. Again, up in our sailing, it was a beautiful morning. It was calm. The orcas, we found some orcas, and we're gliding along on our ship. The shot I wanted to get was this one. I wanted to get the orcas with their exhale, the sun behind it. And so I got the shot, and I'm sitting up there really comfortable on the front deck, enjoying the morning, looking and taking that shot a number of times. And my wife happened to tell me, why don't you look behind the boat? Because there coming up behind the boat was this rather large orca who was frolicking actually surfing on the wake of the boat. And as he or she got closer and closer, I made it back to the back of the boat and got one of our favorite shots. He was literally 5 or 6 feet off the back of the boat, surfing in the wake of the boat. And it was really a great moment. So look around, particularly once you get the shot, begin to look for other angles, other sights, other viewpoints, other compositions. It's one thing you want to learn to do. So another bit of a habit that I used to didn't do so much, but now I do a fair amount of, is leave a little room. Okay, we're criticized or talked about a fair amount of times to fill the frame. Fill the frame. Well, you can do that really tight. You can do it really tight, but you become to get a little risky in terms of if you happen to move a little bit too much one way or too much the other way, you leave yourself no room to edit a little bit in the post process. So I'm seldom perfect, so I tend to leave a little wiggle room quite a bit in my shooting. So a habit I formed is to shoot for cropping. So leave some room around the edges. Always use a different aspect. It allows use of a different aspect ratio in the final edit. It allows for slightly different composition. Things you'll see that you didn't see actually when you took the shot. When you start going through your photos after your shoot, you may see things that you might want to have done a little bit differently, a better crop or composition in the editing afterwards. So this is a habit that I've formed, which is to leave some room around the edges. Here's a picture I took on a sunny morning, and the light was coming through some high trees, and I really enjoyed the play of the light behind the flower. And this is the image that I took. And then in post, I looked at it more carefully and I said, that kind of a crop would give me a better image. It does fill the frame. It's a slightly different aspect ratio. It has a diagonal cutting across in several different directions. And so that's the image I ended up with off that particular file. I also looked at the file and working with it, I said, I might try a vertical composition. It allows a little more of the flowers pointing up, kind of flows upwards. If I had shot tight, sure, I could have changed and turned my camera to get more of a portrait image, but I tend to shoot this way rather rapidly, and it allows me room to crop and get an image like that was my final image. I'm not talking about losing image quality. So you're not leaving so much room that you're then losing quality, but you're leaving some room enough that it can allow you to take a different crop, take a different view, and see things that you might not have seen. We were visiting the West Coast, and the waves were beautiful that day. There was an offshore breeze. We found a point high up to the right of where the waves were coming in, and so I could shoot down on the waves and across. And they were moving and the wind was moving, so I ended up shooting and leaving a fair amount of room. But that was then the crop that I ended up using, and that's the image that I ended up with, which I really enjoy. So leave yourself some room, particularly when things are moving.
Excuse me, Tom.
Well, yeah.
Two points or questions. You've switched over sometime in the recent past to a smaller sensor camera.
Right.
Can you,
Yep.
have you noticed any difference with the same kind of amount of percentage of cropping compared to your original full frame I thought you shot?
Yeah, so I'm shooting, I shoot Olympus 4/3 format. It's still a 25 megapixel image. And I find, like in this particular crop, I ended up with pretty decent image quality. I really have, as long as I don't crop much tighter than that, okay, I find I'm pretty good. And I'll tell you the other thing, with some of the noise reduction programs that are out there today and so on, and I forgot the name of them, but upsizing a little bit with the pixel count, they're very, very good. And what I couldn't do 5 or 6 years ago, I feel very confident that I get high image quality, that I can go to 16 by 20 without any problem whatsoever. And I've done that in the last 4 or 5 years. So
yeah, that one's stunning. Bill makes a comment that when he crops and shows his images, and he's cropped, say, to a 5 by 7, the person says, well, can I have that in 8 by 10 or 11 by 14? So another reason to have a little extra room there.
Yeah, and that's a good point. That's a good point. I've run into that in our own, when we shoot, and we sometimes, I'll shoot portrait, which I'll show you here, not portrait, excuse me, landscape, only fairly wide landscape. And then when we go to put them up in the medical buildings or things like that, the ratios are different. It's another reason for leaving yourself a little bit of room. You can maybe manipulate your images to still make them useful for the final end product. Here's an example of we really enjoyed this morning out on the West Coast. The sun was interesting. It was a really overcast day, but the light was interesting. So I tried to take some shots with something in the foreground to give me some depth. That one didn't particularly work very well. So then I shot this one, which allowed me to see more of the rocks way in the distance, the lighthouse over on the right way in the distance. And so I ended up using this kind of a crop, which is a 1 by 2, which I tend to do fairly often. And you can see, at least in my camera, and I'm sure in some of yours, there are lines for various aspect ratios, some of them fixed into your camera. So you get an idea where you're going. So this ended up being the image that I got, but it allowed me to do some things with the image that if I didn't leave some room, it wouldn't be useful. So that's the habit, that I wanted to talk about here, was to don't overly, I hate to say this, don't overly fill the frame. Don't get so tight that you don't have any room to change the composition slightly or the aspect ratio. You may find some happy surprises in there.
And Tom, Dave makes a comment that shooting with more in your field allows architectural correction of perspective problems.
Yep, you're absolutely right. And that's a good point, because I remember doing some of those, keyhole corrections and things like that, and finding that it didn't work. I couldn't make the correction because it took off part of the composition that I had put together. So keep some of those things in mind for your post editing. So leave enough room to do it. I also find with some focus stacking programs, they tend to crop off the edges. Or if you're doing HDR composites, or you're doing panoramics even, leave a little bit of room, because you'll end up, if your alignment isn't just perfect, you're going to have a different kind of crop. So leave yourself a little bit of room. Okay. One that I've been quite guilty of at times, and I have to get into a real habit, is that stay calm and check your settings. I've more than once been excited to finally arrive at a location, I scramble out, grab the cameras, get hooked up, put the straps on. I usually shoot outside. I start looking for the shot, and then realize I've either left the wrong ISO in, or color balance, or focus mode, or shutter mode, you name it. It can be a number of things. This is an image that we took up at Middle Creek, but we were so excited about getting out there, and just when we got there, they lifted off and started shooting, and I found out that my shutter speed was left over and was pretty slow. So I missed that. So it's left over from the last shot. So I've lost some key shots that way. And so the habit that I've tried to get into now, and my wife helps me, is routinely and calmly always go through your camera settings before you get there, or before you actually get out, or right at the point you finally geared up. Don't go looking for any shots. Go through your settings, make sure you have things the way you want them, and then go about shooting. But that's it's very easy to get caught up and to go and get things. Here's an example. This was the last time we all got together for Christmas. This is our whole family and grandchildren and the whole bunch of us in our living room at Christmas 2 years ago. And to get this shot, I had to put the camera way up on the top of a light stand, way up high in the corner of the living room, so that we could all squeeze in and see everybody. And then I had a Wi-Fi connection with my phone to trigger the camera. Well, I got it all set up, and this is like herding cats to get everybody in there at the right time. Got it all set up, set the f-stop that I wanted, so there was enough depth of field, and then took the picture and took several more. And I'm only previewing them on my phone, so I didn't really see the fact that I thought, well, we got all the pictures, everybody can go now, and they're off. And then I realized the Wi-Fi mode or application that I was using, while it kept the f-stop, it moved the shutter speed for the darkness of the room. And so that's why you see up here, some people are really fuzzy and they're moving around. And there's nothing I could do about it, because I didn't look at it till later, and it was something that I just didn't take enough time to check early on. So take your time, see what you can do. Another one, post-shoot protection. Being a system engineer and being burned sometimes in my career with not backing things up, I'm pretty particular about what I'll call post-shoot protection. So you're back from photographing, you're relaxed and excited to see what you've captured, or you're tired from the day, and it makes you at risk, because you're liable to just either look at them on the back of your camera, go out to dinner, go whatever, and think, well, I'll shoot some more tomorrow, or I'll do it tomorrow, or whatever. But you have to remember, you're gonna never have those moments again, never. Even if you shoot and back them up on 2 cards on your camera, if you drop your camera, you lose your camera or whatever, they're all gone. So do yourself a favor and back them up post-shoot that day. Do it when you get back, make it a habit, import them to your editing machine or to a backup drive or whatever device, but do it first, before you start scanning through them or editing or erasing your card. Bad things happen. Do not let them get more than they need to. And the other thing is check that your files are in your backup. So you may have done a backup, but then just go there and pull a few to view, just make sure they're there. Okay. Good friends of ours who are professional photographers, they do a lot of school shoots and things like that, weddings. Got a new Mac the other day. He wasn't particularly familiar with it. He downloaded his memory card into it, felt he had it all there, put it back in the camera, erased the card, and went about his business. He didn't know what he was doing. Okay, he got nothing into the new setup, and he lost the whole shoot. And so just be careful that you back things up into something other than that particular card, and also check that the files are there in the backup in the place that you're doing it. So that's another thing. You know, these maybe all seem pretty straightforward and not so hard to do, but you know they end up being things that I tend to forget about. I have to reinforce them and really make it a habit. You'll be better off. So we've been talking about some habits about when we're photographing or shortly thereafter. Here are some considerations for after the shoot. These are a little different, but you know, the digital area means we can easily take photographs, and we can take many photographs easily. Part of the things we want to do in our study is work to improve. And the digital area, I'm kind of looking at what I want to talk about here is what the digital area brings to our study. And these are next a few habits I found really useful. So path to progress is what I call it. But I used to delete any photo I didn't feel were keepers. Okay, if I didn't think they were good enough, I just got rid of them. But I've learned, and my wife has helped me see also, that in her review of what I've done and not my review of what she's done, part of the creative process is to review where you have been. So I now consider keeping some of the older photos or the things that I don't consider keepers anymore, but to show where I have been so that I get a reinforcement of what went wrong. And more importantly, I note what I did to improve the photograph and reinforce that process. So I can see my path to creativity and reinforce the corrective efforts. So the habit I'm talking about here is keep some key photos that you've learned from of your own work to show progress. For me, what really helps me do that, and that's what the corollary here is, I date tag the photos in the file name so that I can easily see my progress. I can easily find them by date, and I'll show you a little bit about that. And then I regularly look back a year or two and just kind of scan through the photos. It's easy to do in the browsers that we have these days, and you may see some things that will surprise you. So this is an image, and over here in the lower left-hand corner is my file system. Doesn't have to be right for you. It works well for me. But I start every file with the date. So this was in 2013, in February, on the 8th day. And I do it in this format because I can then sort, and they'll all be in order, date-wise order. My name and then just an index number. But it keeps all the files then unique. So I looked at this photo, and I remember taking this back, 8 years ago. And it was an interesting morning. We were in a harbor, and the light was really pretty. It was calm, overcast, mirror calm, as you can see. And I thought, well, isn't this a cool picture? And I put it into competition way back then, and it got poor marks. And the problem was, as you might expect here, is there's no focal point. Even though it's interesting, just in terms of the physicality, the landscape itself, as a picture, it didn't work at all. So I learned from this, and I've kept it, and it's triggered in me many times the fact that while something may look really cool, you've got to find an angle, you got to find a composition, you got to find a focal point that works to take you into the picture. So that's kind of what I mean by going back. So I've kept that picture. Here's another one I've kept that I took in 2015 in July. and was going through the garden, and I just happened to notice this little, I don't know what kind of frog it was, but it wasn't much bigger than your thumbnail. I mean, that was a rather small flower, and I was fascinated. So what I learned from this one is take the picture, but then move. I mean, that was the only picture I got. I was afraid it was going to move. I ended up taking the same picture over and over again. You know, I should have moved into a different angle, got lower, got closer. I could have had the macro. I should have had a macro on if I was walking through the garden looking to take some of these pictures, or I could have gotten it on because the frog, as it turns out, didn't move too much. The other thing is I've learned to have a reflector handy when I'm going out, particularly taking flower pictures. This was bright sunlight, and I could have used the reflector to fill in some of the shadows a little bit, and it would have made for a nicer picture. I worked this a lot in, I don't know what post-editing program I had at the time, but I got it to be fairly good. But it triggered me to say, you know, I could have shot from over to the right, maybe got the stamens in a different way, framing the frog or complementing the frog. There were a number of things I should have tried that I didn't do. So that's what I've learned from that picture. So that's that habit. You know, keep some pictures that you've learned from. Don't throw them all away. You know, don't just get rid of them. Even if you're short of space, which space is cheap these days, but have a file system that you can easily go back and look, and that's what makes it really good. Just a note, that's why the date system works really well for me, because while I may not remember whether it was a cruise we were on, whether it was a trip we took, whether it was a family outing, whether it was going down to Longwood, I knew roughly what the date was, and I could go find the image set pretty easily. I know there are other ways you can make albums and so on, and I do some of those, but it's interesting sometimes just go back and peruse what you've done several years ago, 5 years ago or so. The other thing that I thought about, particularly when I go back and look, is happy accidents. And that's what digital helps us a lot with, is what to keep and what to delete. You know, that's the question we go about many times. You know, we delete the obvious, out of focus. I mean, really obvious, out of focus, no subject of any kind, you know, duplicates, but keep the marginal, at least for a while, particularly when I do my first culling, I'll do the really obvious, you know, out of focus shots, heavily not exposed in a really heavy way, in the wrong way, no subject, took a picture of the ground, whatever, and duplicates. But keep the marginal ones, at least for a while, because you may end up seeing things in there that, particularly when you came back, because you always tend to, at least I do, think I remember what I took and why I took it. And then when I start looking at some things, I find other compositions, other things in the pictures that I missed, but they're there, and that's what was important. So it's important to find out how to improve, keep some mistakes to learn from. It's kind of what I just talked about, but this particular shot here on the right, I told you I had the wrong settings. And when I went back and looked at it, you know, I began to look at it closer and I realized, well, it's in focus. Okay. And it gave a feeling that there was a lot of movement in the picture if I cropped down a little bit on it and edited it a slightly different way. And I ended up really kind of liking the picture just because it was different. So those are some of the things that you might learn by going back. So keep some of those quote unquote mistakes, particularly if you've learned from them for any particular thing. Keep them because you'll go back and reinforce that learning when you look at them. And you may also find some happy accidents. So do some exploring in your own photography. It's probably there. There are probably things there you never thought were there. You need to go back and look. Here's an example of a picture in 2015 at the Reading Air Show. I took it, but when I went back and looked, and this was a couple of years later, I saw that the clouds had some lines in them, that if I reprocessed the photo, which I did, but I didn't put into this particular setup here, it really led right into the plane itself and made for a more interesting photo. So I enhanced the clouds in post. I could have shot more wide open in the sense of wide open in terms of f-stop, not in terms of focal length, but to blur out the background a little more. So next time I'll look at the background a little more closely, especially the sky. These are some of the things that I've learned and why I keep some of these shots. And I think this is near the end, but this is really important, again, for the digital era, is make it meaningful. You know, we can have unlimited frames. It's easy to hold that shutter down and just let it rip. It's easy to take the same shot over and over, taking it, and then the sky might change just a little bit and take it again, or, you know, but you're really taking the same picture over and over again. So along our path to improvement, consider before pressing that shutter. So when you look at your work or you think of what you're doing, particularly when you get out, well, of course, when you get out on the shoot, then is make every shutter release meaningful. So think about what you're doing. So doing the same thing over and over, no improvement. Take that same picture, you know, if you haven't moved around, if you just, you know, you need to think about what you're doing a little bit, get comfortable with the situation before you even take a picture. Look around, just look around, get comfortable in the situation. Change your stance, move to a new spot, look around you. This was a picture I took out of Middle Creek again. It was not a particularly successful day. And this was near noontime, if I remember right. But I ended up looking, and I was almost looking where we were, I was looking almost directly into the sun. It was coming off the lake. Well, the lake was really kind of calm. And I saw this shot and I thought, well, if I expose it well and I process it correctly, I'll get a nice high key shot. And that's what I ended up doing. And I never really probably would have done it if I hadn't just taken some time and began to look around and see what I might be able to do. And that's how your habits come in. I learned more about high key shots through our club and various things. And I've learned a lot of things that way. But if you take your time to look, some of these habits, your skills are going to come to the fore. And particularly when they work out, they get reinforced. So the habit here is ensure every frame counts. Consider why you are triggering the shutter. It's something to think about before you do. It's easy to do, but it may not provide a very meaningful photograph. Here was a picture, again, at Reading, but I'd been shooting planes all day, whizzing around and trying to capture them moving and so on. And then I started just saying, you know, it's time to just to look around, walk around a little. And I found this composition. Guy was just taking, it was kind of a rainy morning. He was uncovering the antique plane. He was in a period era uniform. Car was there in a position I could frame and make this composition. And it was just kind of a neat picture for me. And I never would have shot it if I hadn't taken the time to begin looking around. So make every shot meaningful. Think about what you're doing. So that's it. Our goal, of course, is improvement. That's the full objective. And go over some of the habits we've talked about here is, you know, make sure you have a place for the lens cap that you do repetitively so you know where it's at, because believe me, sometime you're going to save yourself by getting that cap on there. Take a fresh look, have a clean slate, and see. So don't, while you're studying, you can see images. I've done this now lots, and try and figure out how that image was taken, but don't try and recreate the image. Figure out what worked in that image and then take it out and try and see in a new environment. Just don't retake that particular image. Look for something else. Don't just repeat the shot. You know, taking the same shot over and over again is not a good situation. You're missing something, I'll guarantee it. So make sure you get the shot, but then begin to look. Leave room to crop. I found that to be really useful in my work. Change your settings pre-shoot, or check your settings pre-shoot. Particularly either, you know, before you get there, early in the morning, you know where you're going to go, or when you arrive, you know, pick a particularly average exposure image and just take it, look through your histogram, look through your settings, make sure it's all what you want, and then begin to do the day's work. Back up your shoot when you get back first. It's important. Someday it's really going to save your behind. Map your progress. So keep some mistakes. They'll really reinforce your learning. And then look through your images, make it easy, have some sort of method that you can look through them easily. Go back 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, different areas, different situations, and just kind of look through them, see what you've learned, and there might be some happy accidents in there. So that's it, folks. So nothing really highly technical tonight, but get out there, enjoy shooting, and follow your progress. Let's talk.
Well, Tom, that was really thoughtful, well presented, as typical for you. It was, I found that extremely helpful. There's one comment that I wanted to bring forward from the chat, and that was Bob in the pre-shot preparation. He says Bob has presets in his camera that he can go from one to the other. So, and he can certainly speak to that, but that makes for a quick, I'm shooting birds, so I'm going to flip this preset on. I'm shooting a wide angle landscape. Here's another preset.
Right.
Yeah, the reason I did that was because we were shooting waterfalls up at Ricketts, and then somebody started jumping off the cliffs. And I just used my waterfall settings because I didn't think. And now I have a action shot setting that I can just switch over to. Because I didn't get any of him hitting the water. It was just a big blur because that's how my waterfall shots were set up. And that's what you said, Tom, don't panic. When something like that happens quickly, you can't stop the thing. So I have 3 presets on my camera that I can just switch to real quickly. And that's how
I was going to mention that. I was going to mention that, Bob, and that's a good one. I have 2 that one I've set for, sometimes I'll do focus stacking. And there's a particular setup that I like, and I shoot birds in flight, and there's a particular setup there that I like. And you're right, it takes, at least in the camera, the Olympus I have, there's a number of menu steps to go through to get everything just right.
Yep.
And it's easier to go click into those preset settings. But even then, like I've done with taking the Christmas photo and other things, you can get excited and miss something. So
I don't see you getting excited, Tom.
Yeah.
Hey,
Tom, your happy accidents. I like that terminology. I made reference at the start of John Paul Caponegro's father in the video, and the father goes through 2 images that he did extremely well with. They were both total accidents, and that's the word he used. And he thought he missed the shots until he looked at the image they got, and these 2 were his happy accidents. So you'll see reference to that in the 9-minute video I plugged in the newsletter.
Yeah.
I do naming somewhat similar to you, but instead of my name, which is in the metadata, I put the location when I import. So I'll have the date, Middle Creek, and then the file number.
That's the way I do it.
And that helps me with my keywording and searching, etc. Because I have a copyright in the metadata with all my contact info, etc. So I don't put my name there.
I just
Bill had a comment. Bill, do you want to make your comment?
Where's Bill?
Bill.
I think that was Joe.
Excuse me, sorry
No,
about
Bill has something in the chat.
I do quite a few events in addition to my own personal photography. And one thing that I found was invaluable for me was I have a spreadsheet, a detailed list of every single piece of equipment I have, all the lenses, my cameras, batteries, cleaning cloths, which I'm a kind of stickler for, especially after getting food on a lens at a food thing I was photographing. And then what I do is identify the venue where I'm going and check the possible equipment that I need, and then check it off as I pack it. It saved me, and I did that after I got out on a photo shoot one time, and luckily it was my my own down at Middle Creek, which is 45 minutes from me, and had forgotten to put in my SD cards and left the extras at home as well. So lesson learned. At least it wasn't something critical, but really it's invaluable for me. And I even if I'm just going to go over to Blue Marsh 10 minutes from me, I'll have that checklist and make sure I have the right equipment.
Yep.
Tom,
But, you know,
just to add to the checklist that you had, my pre-shot list. Usually, if I know I'm going out the night before, I'll go through the whole thing as you suggested. But I also will routinely clean each lens and each filter and each slide-in filter I have, and I go through a whole process of blowing and cleaning and et cetera every time I go out, except the last time I went out. And it was a sunrise shot, and I ended up having some flecks of dust on the filters. So they were slide-in filters for graduated neutral density and a reverse neutral density, et cetera. But they turned out to be dusty, and people will tell you, it doesn't matter, it doesn't go in the focus. But when the sun is glaring into your lens and you have any speck of dust, I had dozens of shots that I had to then get rid of all the little speckles that the dust on the filters caused. The lenses were spotless, but the filters I put on were problematic. And I think that's the first time I didn't clean my filters before going out, and it was a big mistake. So I won't make that mistake again, I don't think, in my pre-shot checklist.
That's a
really
good
annoying.
Good point, Vince. I also had a very, very bad habit of getting home from an event or a photo thing, and really just, you know, as Tom mentioned, we're anxious to see our images. So pop the SD cards out and dump the cameras and lenses just on my desk, and, you know, don't worry about cleaning them or putting them away until I need to. Now, when I get home, the first thing I do after I take the SD cards out is clean equipment, put it away, take the SD cards, back them up, then do my first pass of culling. So I tend to be a slob, but when it comes to my camera equipment, I tend to be a little more careful.
I don't trust the cleaning afterwards, although I will do that if I've been in the water or the beach, because I don't know what's going to happen as it's sitting in my closed bag and my
Hey, how about the coal mine we did?
yeah.
Oh my
Dust
God.
everywhere.
I was cleaning for a month.
I have a very distinct remembrance of being in a camera store in Philadelphia, a big one at the time, with a well-known guy who owned the place. And I was talking to him about screw-on filters, and he was telling me, I never clean my filters. They're not a big deal. The lens will never pick up that dust. And I remember that discussion because I was shocked that his Leica camera his own Leica camera was dirty, the lens. And I've heard that from multiple people, and it's just not true. Dirt on your lens will affect your image quality.
Oh yeah, one of the biggest things, if you can't see it, is it will reduce your contrast, and that's something that's very hard to get back, and your colors. So keep it clean.
Well, just
I
think
have,
what it does to your eyeglasses or your contacts or your eyeballs themselves, you know, anything on there obscures the light.
well, I have a practical tip. I keep a pair of emergency photography shoes in my car. Now, as a woman, it maybe is more important because, you know, when I'm on my way to work, I may be wearing the kind of shoes for which I couldn't step out and go on the side of the road and get the right angle for whatever shot. So I keep an old pair of sneakers behind my driver's seat, and I can slip out of my dress shoes and into those sneakers and go anywhere if I see a shot.
That's a good
Absolutely.
one.
Real good one.
Yep.
And
Couple
good.
maybe
people
take a
made
shower
reference-
cap with you to put over your camera if it's raining.
Nope.
Yeah, I have a rain bag for my camera.
Yeah.
A couple people made reference to SD cards. I was out with two buddies that I often shoot with prior to the pandemic. And halfway through the trip, Mike, he had to change his SD card. He did not zipper his bag because he was rushed well enough, and he ended up dropping that SD card for 2 days worth of shooting. And ever since then, I have little labels that I've made reference to before that I have on every piece of my camera gear with phone number. And some, if it's big enough, the piece, I can have my name on it. But all of my SD cards have my phone number on them.
And additionally, 2 days worth of shooting, you had to come back somewhere, should have backed up at least one day. And you get lazy in some of that.
Well, we were camping. It was a truck camper. There was no way for him to back up.
Well, I
Wow.
still bring a battery. I bring a drive with me on our boat trips and so on that I plug into the computer.
Yeah.
And the computer will dump the card to the drive, and I at least get it on 2 drives before I go anywhere.
Yeah, Western
So-
Digital makes an SSD that you just pop the SD card in, press a button, and it backs the whole thing up, and you're good to go.
What would you recommend for that, Brian?
There's a Western Digital one. It's a Tough Book or something like that. I'd have to look it up, Vince. I can look it up after
Yeah.
the call here.
Yeah, that would be good. Because I actually do want to do that.
Mhm.
Oh, I thought what you were going to say, Tom, when you were holding up your finger, one is Mike had multiple days on one card. I never go out the second day. I will always put a new card in no matter how much room I have, or whether I've already used 2 cards the first day. Each day is the start of a new card, just in case the card's corrupt or something happens.
If you back your stuff up, this is just a technical thing. At the end of the day, and you're sure you've now got your cards backed up in probably 2 places. One on your whatever your editing device is, and then one in another backup. Instead of erasing your card, you should format your card. As it turns out, the way the electronic format function works, it only exercises the card in a very small area, which is basically the directory that tells where everything is on the card. It erases the directory. And that's all it does. It doesn't go through the whole card erasing files, which, as it turns out, is actually more stressful on the card, and over the long run will decrease the life of the card. So I've read that recently, and it agrees with my understanding and my experience with cards. It's best just to do a format, because that erases the whole card. It does it in a very easy way for the card itself. Doesn't stress the electronics in any way. And that way, you have a good card. So that's all I'm saying. I tend to keep the same cards because I know they're good. But I take them out daily, dump them, and then reformat them and go again. That's just what I do.
Actually,
reformat every
erasing files on almost any media does not erase the file. It does just
Yeah.
frees up the area on the card to be used by other next files. Whereas formatting is like the Etch-a-Sketch. You take it upside down, you turn it upside down, and it's all 1s and 0s, or just all 0s, or whatever it does to it. Erasing it only frees up the area. I know that used to be that way on floppy disks and stuff too, because you could unerase them. You could get programs to go in there and unerase the stuff because you just rebuild that directory.
Tom, do you have any thoughts on how long you can use an SD card before they might be aging out and be about to die?
Yeah, my experience. I mean, I've ended up, buying probably a new card every 2 or 3 years, just because I end up getting bigger ones and they get cheaper. And so probably the oldest one I have is maybe 3 years old, and I've had no problems whatsoever. That's all I can say. I mean, I have a
My
good quality
experience-
card. I think SanDisk or whatever, but that's my experience.
My experience with SD cards is I can use them until I got my Nikon Z6, and then I have to use the QXD cards or whatever. Can't use SD cards anymore. I was wondering if there was an adapter that you could put SD cards into a QXD holder like you can do with little mini SD ones. Put it in your camera.
I don't think so. I think the interchange scheme is completely different. so it won't work.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to have an interface probably in there. That's
No,
they do it with the little mini ones, micro
Yeah.
SD cards.
Tom, is there any validity to what some photographers say in that you shouldn't go with the largest memory cards? You should maybe go with the smaller ones. They're more secure. Instead
more
of
secure?
instead of a, like, let's say, one of the larger SD cards that hold a lot of images, a lot of memory on them, you're better off going with the smaller size cards that suit your needs, of course, but aren't huge.
Yeah, it's a hard one, I guess. It depends. It depends a lot on what your workflow is, so to speak. I mean, unless you're taking videos and you're taking a fair amount of videos, you don't need to have a very huge card if you do a daily dump, so to speak. I mean, I seldom, even when I'm shooting birds and I shoot a lot in flight, and I bring back, I don't know, 2,000-3,000 pictures. Where else have we been? We ended up 2,000-3,000 pictures. But that still doesn't. If you got an 8 gigabyte card, or I think I have a 32 gigabyte card now, I don't come close to. I very rarely fill that card up, and then I have another one in the second slot. I don't send my images to 2 cards at once. Some people do. I don't know whether that answered your question, but I don't tend to get a very big card because I never really stress it too much because I dump it every day.
Yeah, when I've heard some people speak on that exact question, the security comes, in their opinion, that you don't, if the card goes bad or you lose it, you don't lose as much in your data. So if you have a 128 gigabyte card and you use that for a whole trip of a week, and it turns out to be bad or you mess up, you've lost everything, as opposed to having 4 32 gigabyte cards. So that's how I've heard of people speak of the quote security of it.
So I just, again, I'd reinforce the fact that don't put the whole trip on one card,
Yes, absolutely.
Get a backup mechanism, either like, I forgot who mentioned it, where you can back the card up immediately, or bring a laptop with you, back it up there, bring a plug-in drive and be able to back it up there. Particularly when you pay to go on trips or you've done something that you're never going to get there again. Regardless whether you get there again, you're never going to see that same moment again. And I would strongly advise you to back up, daily at least.
Yeah, if your camera has dual slots, more than likely you're going to have options to have it as a overflow from slot 1, or a lot of times if I'm doing an important shoot, I'll have it as backup so that it's writing to both cards at the same time.
Yep. And that still doesn't solve the problem. If you are out on a shoot and you drop your camera, you lose everything. So if you get again, get a workflow that you have a reasonable backup period of time, whether it's daily or, depending on the activity, even shorter than daily, but I would strongly advise to do that. And then make sure you do a quick sample to make sure that the files are actually there in the backup.
Hey, Tom, do you use any sort of an online backup solution where your whole computer is being backed up online somewhere?
No, I don't. Some people do, and it's gotten a lot better. When I started really working about the backup, I think when we had, forgot his name, who's the professional photographer, does a lot of glamour shots from up in Allentown area. We had come to the club a couple of times. He gave,
what kind
he
of
said I
shots?
should glamour shots. He does magazine work. He said his moniker is I shoot people. I forgot his name. Anyway, he came and talked to, and this was probably 10 years ago now. I'm a young man. And he used Drobo, which is a a way to stack a number of drives together. It's like a RAID. The technology doesn't matter except from the fact that you put 4 or 5 drives into this special unit and it automatically takes care of things itself. If one of the drives fails, its technology has it already backed up on other drives. In other words, you won't use it. So I back all my stuff up into that. I load it into my editing machine first, and then every week or so, I back everything up into the Drobo. And then just in case, because we have a house fire or something like that, it gets destroyed because various things happen. About every 5 or 6 months, I back that up into, as it turns out, 2 or 3 1 terabyte drives, and I put that into a fire safe, and that's the way I do all my work.
Jenny, I use Backblaze, which is an online storage. I have 5 terabytes or so of digital images through Backblaze. I think it took a month to upload.
Just when you started out, you mean, when you first
Yeah,
did it?
at the very first time, but now it's pretty instantaneous. So if I dump 1,000 shots into the file, Backblaze will have those backed up the next morning. And the files are available instantaneously through Backblaze.
Yeah,
That's
I've
what I
looked
use
into that
for-
one. I've considered
Yeah,
that
so
one.
it's the one that almost any professional that I've heard speak on this topic, it's the system that they use. It will cost about $60 a month, a year. Something like that.
Yeah, I think I remember
It's
that.
an incredible feeling of security. And Tom, yes, you get a little nervous to say, did it really back it up? And once a month, Backblaze will come and say, give me a little summary email. And then that reminds me. And when they do that, I open up Backblaze and I see, okay, there's 3 billion files that have been copied. And here's the last one. And I'll spot check a couple of them and my files are there. If you
And the other thing you could do is to then pull out of there, download a few files, and make sure you know the process to get your files back into a position you can use them.
I did do that practice actually with them a few weeks ago to answer somebody's question. And I talked to the tech and I did that. So I kind of know how to do that. And if you want a hard drive and you want to pay for it, within 3 days, you can get a hard drive of everything they have in the cloud delivered to your house. And then you send the hard drive back and they credit you back for the money for the hard drive, but you've paid for the express delivery if you have some dire emergency that you have to have your entire file of everything.
Yeah, I use
Backblaze
that.
is really the one that most people depend on that I know of.
Yeah, I use that as well. And the other thing nice with Backblaze, it'll back up any external hard drive that you plug into your computer. So I have 4 external hard drives that I just move around. I have different things on different ones. So it's like 15 terabytes now. And as long as you plug them in once a month, unless you have their extended plan, then it'll keep them forever. But as long as you plug it in at least once a month, it backs the stuff up.
Yeah, I
But
use Backblaze too. I like it a lot.
yeah,
I use it as a last resort in case something happens with my external hard drives.
yeah, I have 2 copies here too, just in case. So
Yeah, and I'm using the Backblaze and I have a RAD 5 big external hard drive with everything in it. And it's all redundant inside that drive. But that could fail, and indeed it has. It has 2, 4, it has 6 hard drives in it, 6 CD drives in it, and 2 of them have failed in the first 2 years. It's now about 6 years old, and they got replaced under warranty. So I mean, even though it's a commercial unit meant to work 24/7 in a commercial environment, the Toshiba drives, and despite that, 2 of them failed. But everything's redundant and backed up, and despite having that, you still need some other security. Something could physically happen here, and that's
Yeah.
where Backblaze comes in.
We had a house fire in our past, so I know it's good not to have things only at your house. Yeah, by all means.
Tom, can you speak about your fire safe? I've been looking at that for my backups rather than carrying them back and forth to the bank in the safety box. But I got lost trying to figure out, well, how long do you need the thing to work? They'll give you time, like 20 minutes of fire, 30 minutes of fire, et cetera, et cetera. Do you know
Yeah,
what you have?
this is a, commercially available Sentry safe. It's not that big. It's probably 24, 20 by 20 by 20, weighs about 150 pounds, but you can move it. It's just bolted to the floor, but it is good for, I think it's 2 or 3 hours rated for, for fire, for digital products. Okay. And that's what you have to make sure that it's rated for. And that's what we use. Since there, it doesn't need to have a whole lot of space inside because you're just talking about, 2.5 inch drives with a terabyte on each, and they don't take up a whole lot of space.
And is that waterproof too? Because if you got a 3-hour fire,
Yeah.
that's a lot of water dumping on your house to put it out.
Oh yeah, no, it's rated waterproof, fireproof, etc. Yep. And it would no doubt end up in the basement, but that's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, if you really had a bad fire. And the other thing is, if you're robbed for whatever reason, it's bolted to the floor with inside bolts and so on. I mean, they'd really have to want that little safe for some reason.
What brand was yours?
It's Sentry, Sentry, I believe it is.
You didn't happen to buy it on Amazon, did you? Because they have a ton of them.
Yeah, well, no, I think we bought it at local Home Depot or did we order it? Really? Got shipped? Wow. Yeah, check and see if they have free shipping.
Well, with Amazon Prime, you do. Catherine makes reference, Tom, to having a second body as your backup. She was on a trip and one of her bodies broke. And she would have been stuck if she only had one. But I used to do that actually with my film camera. I had 2 cameras or 2 bodies, and I would have a different lens on each one. And I had that as my backup, et cetera. But my body could never carry that weight again. I'm trying to pare down.
Yeah, I bring a second body. It's usually my wife, and it's her camera that provides the backup. So
Unless she falls in the water.
yeah, unless, as she did once, falls face first into a stream as we were trying to cross it with the camera, but it ended up drying out. So
When we were early married in Europe, I slipped off a hill trying to get the tripod angled shot, and I ended up, it was a pretty big, it could have been a gigantic drop, but I kind of caught myself on a ledge, and where my wife was standing was above my head. And the first thing I said was, take my camera. I had my camera. The camera came down with me, the whole camera and tripod. And I said, take my camera and tripod. And she was not happy with me. That was the first thing that was going to come up.
Go ahead, Margaret. What did I first say?
I fell in the midst of a tidal river, fell down, and Tom was right behind me and said, oh my gosh, the camera. He didn't care that I had fallen on these horrible rocks and crushed my right hip, where's the camera? And I gave it to him in a very unkind way.
You only felt like it crushed your hip.
Lee made reference, he can speak up to this, but Lee says the Drobo body case can actually fail. And in today's email, there was one of the photographers that I get emails from made reference that his Drobo case failed. The drives are all good, but he couldn't start the drives up because the case did not work electronically.
Yeah, and that happens rarely, but it happens, and that's why I back the whole thing up onto another set, routinely. I didn't trust the cloud. The cloud's become pretty good. I just have this setup that I've used for over 10 years, and I kind of keep using it.
I got a question for Brian. If I saw your link with the 2 terabyte My Passport wireless SSD.
Mhm.
Help me to understand what's the value in spending $900 on that.
It's a quick
Not
off.
saying,
If
not
you're
saying that-
traveling, Go ahead.
Go
Sorry.
ahead. I just don't understand it. It just seems really expensive.
For me, if I've got multiple cards, I want to know I haven't backed up and I'm on a long run and trip, I'm not going to be home. I'm just backing
Okay.
up on there and I'm saving the cards too. So I got 2 copies with me. I'll keep the drive and the safe back at the hotel or wherever, and the card someplace else. It's a personal decision in terms of, backing up.
So do you just plug your SD card into this?
Yeah, you just plug it in and it runs through and backs it up straight to that drive.
What's the wireless portion of it? What's that
You
for?
can access it wirelessly through your phone and look at the pictures and stuff. I don't use that function, but you can.
So you don't need any, do you need power?
No, it has its own battery in it. I mean, you want to charge it obviously to keep it going, but no, it has its own battery.
Wow.
Jay, maybe the time you would want that is if you were on a safari in Africa or something and you knew, someplace where it's a once in a lifetime situation and it's worth it to make sure you have everything backed up.
And I think part of that is it's gone up in price because I think they discontinued it. So there may be a replacement that I'm just not aware of. I just dug up the model number I had, and it comes to that. And they look like they only have the 2 TB model, which is the most expensive. And I don't remember it being that expensive when it was first deployed. So I think it's just because it's getting old.
It sounds like it would be nice for the convenience, and it's all in one, and it's portable and it's small.
Yeah.
I guess those are the advantages. If you can't carry around your laptop and a couple external hard drives or whatever you use to back up your stuff, it's a smaller, more portable option, I guess.
Yeah, I've used it when we go camping pretty often is when I've used it the most.
So Tom, in reference to pre-shot, how many people who are still here have gone out, grabbed their camera quick and was just going to do a little bit and got to the scene with nothing else but the camera, lens, and SD card, and the battery died after 5 shots? I've done that. That is very frustrating.
Yeah.
Well, my
I have a car
battery was
charger.
at home.
Never, never.
So I had one more
I don't
thought
believe you,
about-
Bob.
Hang on. So Margaret has created a habit in me that I didn't have before.
Right, and that is stop for the shot. Because when Tom and I first started doing photography together, I would see something and say, that's a really interesting shot. And he'd say, okay, we'll come back to it.
We're typically
when we
driving.
finish getting to where we're going. And I began to realize, well, the light will change, we'll forget, it'll never happen. And made a point of it, to the point where he would say, well, do you want me to turn around? And I would say, yes, turn around, And-
Being a good engineer, I had an
an agenda.
agenda in place.
You
But
never
that
get back. You can
shot,
never find the shot
recognize-
again, Margaret.
What's that?
You never find that shot again if you don't stop
You
then.
don't.
And that's what I've learned.
And it's a really hard thing to, not that you can always do it, but to recognize sometimes you just need to stop and take the shot. Just put other things aside and let the agenda go for a moment and take the shot. And there are a couple of them that all of you have seen that have been, our debates between do we stop or not stop or turn around or, we'll miss it.
How many trips have I gone on where it's a 6-hour drive and it ends up being a 12-hour drive?
Yeah,
Yeah, because
Oh
of
my
all the stops.
we stopped at what, every 3
Speaking
miles?
of-
Lee made a
batteries.
comment in the chat room about, and he can certainly speak up, but one of the advantages of 2 bodies with different lenses is if you're in a dusty location, you don't have to change the lens necessarily of your camera and get dust inside the camera. Just one little point, with the new mirrorless cameras, you may all know this, but I did not read the instructions when I started shooting my mirrorless. You're not supposed to take a lens off a mirrorless camera without turning the camera off first, at least for Canon, because that then closes the sensor, and now the sensor will not get dust on it. If you take your lens off while the camera is on, which is how I always did it, with my my prior non-mirrorless camera that exposes the sensor. So just
my comment came from that recent 10-week trip I had to the Northern Territory in Northern Australia, and I got dust on the sensor, which I couldn't move, and I thought, I'm not going to let that happen again, and so I bought another body and just left the wide angle on that one and the telly on the other, and yeah, that was my lesson learned. But you know, it is 2 cameras to carry around. And the bodies, I guess, aren't as heavy as the lenses, but it's still, you know, you've got to have a big enough bag, all that sort of thing.
Yeah, we have that problem when we shoot at the motorcycle track. It's all dirt, and you do not take your lens off.
Yeah.
Not within the arena, at least, or else the inside of your camera is going to be totally covered in dust, and it's clay and it sticks. Yeah.
I always thought you should turn off your camera when you change the lens on any kind of camera. I always turn off my camera on either the mirrorless or the regular one.
I think perhaps when the power's still on, the sensor has like a charge to it and attracts dust. At least I would think there might be some kind of electrical charge on that sensor.
That's
Whereas when
generally
you turn it
true.
off, when you turn them off, there's like a cleaning process that happens sometimes. Like some of the sensors used to shake all the particles
some
off.
do.
Yeah.
It's just always better, safer to have the power off when you're breaking contacts and the lens mount and everything else. It's just a good idea.
Vince, you didn't mention my comment. Don't use a sweaty pocket. I'm serious. That's not a joke. That's not a joke. In the summer, if I put my lens cap in my breast pocket, I pull it out, it's all wet. So you got to be careful of that, because I've many times had to dry my lens cap. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, maybe Vince isn't a sweaty guy. I don't know.
Depends on the time of the year, I guess.
all right. Any other comments before we close?
Thanks, Tom.
Tom, that was excellent.
Oh, you're welcome. It's fun to share. I wish we could be together face to face. That's more fun, but
Yeah.
We had a
It'll
great
come.
turnout. We had 38 people here, Tom.
It was
That's
great
wow.
to see both
Great.
of you, Tom and Meg. So nice to see you.
thanks.
You guys.
Well, I'll send you a PDF, Vince, or that's what I'll do. And you can
Great.
put
Thank
it
you.
where it needs to go.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Okay.
Thank you, Tom.
Good night, y'all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Tom.
Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Great.
Steve,
Thank you very
I-
much.
All right. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.